Right on, right on, right on. Welcome, everybody. We're going to put on a little song just as a lead in to what Eddie's going to say. We're expecting a few more people in the mix. But in the meantime, we want people to get ready. So listen up. Easy like Sunday morning, right? On a Sunday afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. We get started in just a minute here.
People get ready. There's a train coming.
Believe that.
You don't need no baggage. You just get on board.
If you haven't done so, get some juice. I see Maria's got some coffee or some tea. Whatever suits you fancy. Even some bubbly. I see Amy got some hot chocolate. Go ahead, Amy. Warm them up.
For the train to Jordan, picking up passengers coast to coast.
We got Providence in the building tonight. Zwana, welcome.
Yes, sir.
Danielle in the mix. Good to see all of y'all.
Yes. Can't really put my video on right now, but let them hear.
It's all good. No worries.
There ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who would hurt all mankind. Just the same is all. Believe me now. Have pity on those whose chances grow thinner. For there's no hiding place.
There's Jane. What's up, Jane?
Yes, yes. Nephrok is with us.
And no.
Great to have you with us, Nev. Looking forward to the second hour here. The second half hour, we coming to you soon. Got cool coach Carl Eileen Carl, baby.
Oh,
Co-founder of Beantown Lockers. Good to see you.
see ya. Hey, y'all. What's
Yeah, y'all.
up, Eddie?
Right on, right on, right on. Thanks for joining us, y'all. It's good to see everybody.
Yeah.
As you might have seen from the flyer, this is titled, What the Funk? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. But let me say a few quick words about what you saw a little bit earlier if you joined. First of all, my name is Aaron. I'm with the Beantown Locker. And we are doing this as a part of really what's been started mid-year, a celebration of the 10th anniversary of our crew. It's also the 50th anniversary of this dance that we love locking, created by Don Campbell, who we lost earlier this year. But certainly every time we get down, we're celebrating his legacy and everyone else that created this dance. It gives us so much joy. And what we were playing earlier by way of the video montage is it's really just a small set, little look at the pop-up performances we've been doing on a monthly basis in collaboration with the rotating set of Boston area crew. Some of them specialize in street styles, others specialize in internationally rooted styles. And again, it's a part of this bigger celebration we've been doing. And we were blessed to receive the support from the Boston Foundation for this series that we call Monkey Friday, and interlocking invitational. So those were the highlights earlier. And what I'd like to do now, I'm about to turn the floor over to my man, a crew member of Beantown Lockers. He is our resident DJ, always lifting us up, putting us on the new funky music, not only from the States, but from around the world. And he is none other than a funk aficionado. And his name is EdWord Galan. So give it up for Eddie.
Yeah.
And along the way, Eddie gets
well,
started. Yeah, I was going to say, use the chat if you want to make comments or ask questions. I'm going to lift them up. I'll call them to Eddie's attention along the way. But in the meantime, let's listen to what he's got to say.
Right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Yeah, if you don't mind, go ahead and put yourself on mute, just so that there's no other noise. Nice. Thank you. Great. So, yeah. My name is EdWord Galan, and I am a lover of funk music. I DJ, I dance, and what I love most is just like digging into and going into culture and history. And that's what I want to offer you a little bit about today. Um, so I want to start off by saying like thank you to all the people that have come. Like y'all, it's not a party unless the people show up. So I'm really thankful for everyone here, friends, crew members, and people that I may not even know. And real special thanks to Nephrok for agreeing to do this with us. And yeah, man, met him. I only got to meet him once, but real funky cat. And I'm sure he's gonna drop some knowledge about the Boston funk scene. And also, real special thanks to Aaron for just like helping this whole process, and really actually kind of being the one that spurred me to do this. And yeah, a huge part of the reason we are doing Funky Fridays, and let me tell you, for me, it's been really special. Like it's something that has brought a lot of light this summer. And I know that all of us know that this is a year where we need a lot of light, we need a lot of love, and time to just relax and enjoy ourselves. And thanks to this project that we've been able to undertake together, those have been many of the highlights for me this summer. So really thankful for you, Aaron, for that. So let's get into this. We're going to talk about culture. Culture is an expression of a group's values. That's what matters to a group. And through a culture, you can see what has come before and what's coming after. And, or I would say another way of saying that is what comes before, the history, and what a group aspires to be. And culture is also a way to transmit energy, to transmit information. And the funk is a powerful transmission of energy and information. That's one way that I would describe it. This is going to be part one of perhaps a series. I'm not going to be able to cover, trust me, I could talk about this topic for 5 hours straight, but we're going to do about half an hour. And we're going to get into the music, we're going to get into the people, we're going to get into the history. And but really what I want to impart on you, what I want you to get out of this is to be encouraged to build a relationship with this music and with this culture, this lifestyle, if you want to call it. Because by building a relationship, that is how something has actual value to you, right? Like all of us, we want the people that matter to us, things that matter, we care about them. We know where they live, we know their parents, we know their life. And it's the same thing when you're talking about cultural things, right? Music, we want to learn a bit about it so that we can appreciate it more. So that's really my goal. I want you to grow to love funk, if you don't already do so, as much as I do. So when we talk about funk, we're talking about it's funk didn't arise out of nowhere. Um, but we're talking about the 1960s essentially. And everything that came before kind of led to what eventually became the funk. So we're talking about, and we're talking very specifically, I'm going to focus a lot of attention on the African American community within the United States because they are the progenitors of this culture. Funk is, there's a lot of ways that I can describe it. There's a lot of things I could say, but the main word that comes to my mind when I think about funk is liberation. And that is liberating your mind, liberating your soul, and liberating your ass. All right. Um, so, wow, I actually forgot to go over. I had some slides. I'm realizing I am not sharing slides yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Give me a second here.
See, right there, Eddie, what he did was he freed himself from the slides. Add that to the list.
There we go. All right. Can it's hard to see everyone and do the slides, but can everyone see the slide? Everyone see? All right, sweet. I'm gonna try and move this over to the corner. Sweet. All right. So yeah, liberation, liberating yourself, liberating your spirit, liberating who you really are is a lot of what the funk was about. And if we're talking about liberation, right, usually liberation movements are a reaction to not feeling free. And African Americans in the 60s, they had a lot of reason to maybe not feel free in the past, but there were things happening in the 60s that were giving a lot of people hope and a lot of people just energy to do something new, to try different things. We're talking about in the 1960s, people were essentially entering a new reality in a way. People were gaining rights, people were growing, and their voice was growing in power. And they had opportunities that were simply not available to them before. And one of the biggest internal migrations that any country has ever seen occurred between 1916 and 1970 in this very country, the United States, okay? And it was the Great Migration, all right? And the Great Migration was a movement of 6 million African Americans from the rural South to cities in the North like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. There were different stages. Some of them were migrations that happened right after World War II. Some of it was earlier. A lot of it was earlier, actually. And something that is good to keep in mind about the period around when the Great Migration started. Some people would think that the Great Migration would have happened, like right after slavery ended, but actually it didn't. People kind of stayed put and stayed, for the most part, stayed where they were after slavery. Some people did move, but not a huge amount. And we had a period I think you guys know about, which is called Reconstruction. If you don't know, I'm not going to get into it too much, but basically there was a whole period where Blacks gained a lot of rights, a lot of power, and it was basically enforced by the military. So it was like the North, the Union, occupying the South and making sure that there was a transition after the Civil War. But what ended up happening is after the Reconstruction, the troops left, and you could say that racism and just black hate against Black people came back with a vengeance along with that. And there was a lot of just brutality. I mean, the heyday of the KKK was actually in the early part of the last century. And there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of people being, a lot of indignities being suffered by the African American community. So people said, you know what? I'm going to take my chances and pack up all my stuff and move to a place that I've never been to, that may have had, you know, some loose ties there, family member here, family member there. And they made that move to the great unknown, to the north. And you know, this is something that, you know, I can relate to a lot as someone who immigrated here from the Dominican Republic. This feeling of just wanting to go somewhere, just with the hope that things are going to be better than where you are. And a large part of this migration actually occurred by train. So folks took, you know, they took buses, they took cars, but a large portion of this also happened by train. So the train came to signify, it came to have special significance for the African American community of this time. So I want to play you this little clip from a show. Who here has heard of Soul Train? Great. So this was a very influential show that in the African American community started in 1971, I think. Let me play you the clip and we'll kind of talk about it more.
Soul Train, the hippest trip in America. 60 non-stop minutes across the tracks of your mind into the exciting world of soul with guest stars, The Emotions, Maze featuring Frankie Beverly, and the Soul Train Dancing. And now, here is your host, Don Cornelius.
Hey there, welcome aboard. You're right on time for another sweet ride on the Soul Train. You hold on to that spot you got. We'll be coming right back at you with a biggie by the Ohio Players right after some very important messages.
All right. So yeah, that's a little taste of what Soul Train was about. Again, this show was first aired October 2nd, 1971. It aired all the way until March 27, 2006. All right, so it's actually has not like the top longest, but it's like up there. It's like in the top 3 of like longest running shows in American history. And it was one of the first Black owned and Black run nationally syndicated shows anywhere. Okay. So this was highly significant. To give you a little bit more context, there was a time in America where radio, what you watched, what you listened to, it was very segregated, and it was segregated not only by race, but it was actually segregated just by region, right? So if you live in Arizona or Southern California, you're listening to the country western stations. You live in the Mississippi Delta, you're listening to the Mississippi Delta blues. You live in New Orleans, you listen to music there, so on and so forth, right? And it wasn't even, I think radio in people's cars didn't even become a thing until the 1950s. And in the 60s is when you had maybe like sort of mass adoption of some of this technology. So when a show was like nationally syndicated, anyone in the country could view it. It was a big deal. It's a big deal to be able to see everyone be able on the same page about one thing. And yeah, the U.S. is such a large and diverse country, right? Like we see that even now as to a certain extent, right? We do share a common culture because we all watch the same television, we all do, more or less the same products, but even now it remains a very diverse place, and it was even more so at that time. So what happened with this great migration that I talked about with African Americans moving to different parts of the United States was you had a sort of like a melting pot with it, but I called it the intra-national cultural syncretism, okay? So basically, cultural syncretism is essentially when you have two different cultures kind of coming together and melding and becoming one. Another example of this would be like Santeria in Dominican Republic or Cuba, and a lot of places where you have a mixture of Catholic beliefs along with the traditional African beliefs, and they become one thing. So the African Americans who moved from the South over to New York, they were meeting groups like Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and different types of, Italians, all these groups that they perhaps didn't have a lot of contact with before, and new things, new culture is emerging from all of that. So as we know, that's really how innovation happens, is by different kind of mindsets meeting and collaborating, creating something new. One of the places that was and is still one of the main hubs of innovation is the San Francisco Bay Area. And that is home to this band right here. All right, does that work? Is it Sly and the Family Stone now?
Yeah, we see a black and white picture of it.
There are full screen.
So getting back on track. So yeah, Sly and the Family Stone. And this is about, I'm kind of winding down here. This is the last kind of group I want to talk about, and then that segues into a lot more stuff. But Sly and the Family Stone is actually a highly, highly significant group in the history of funk, because these guys were groundbreakers in so many different ways. And when you talk about, funk is very much inspired by the social movements that were happening at the time of its inception. So you're talking about the hippies, you're talking about the free love, and the kind of new attitudes towards racial integration that were happening And at this time, to watch and see a group like this with women and men and white men, I think one of the guys is Latino, just to see a group, integrated group playing like this was powerful. It struck people in a way that if you were outside of the Bay Area, liberal Bay Area, you were like, what the hell's going on here? And Sly was one of the first to really kind of come out with this like new psychedelic look. He's the one that inspired a lot of people to sort of start to change their aesthetic. If you look even look at James Brown performing in the 50s, he's wearing a suit and tie. There's a lot of people who are, you know, the aesthetic before was could be very formal, but this marks a very kind of marked change in the aesthetic of the music of Black popular music. So the next thing I want to play is a clip of Sly and the Family Stone. And for this one, I highly encourage you to actually open up a browser tab with the link that Aaron's going to share and watch it on, not through my screen, but watch it on your own browser tab. All right. So that is a taste of Sly and the Family Stone. Um, this was a group that, by most accounts, in the group that stole the show at Woodstock when that event happened. Everyone said, everyone that witnessed it, they went on something like 3 o'clock in the morning or something when they performed in Woodstock, and everyone who witnessed it was like, "Whoa, what the hell is this?" Like they couldn't believe what they were watching. Um, so really groundbreaking band. I want to open it up for a little bit of discussion, and I just want to know, like, what are your impressions just from seeing Sly and the Family Stone now, 2020? Um, based on all the things that kind of I talked about, the leading up to this, what impression does this group make on you now? Is it still revolutionary to see a group of integrated group singing and dancing and being on stage? Is that still something that's kind of revolutionary? Like, I don't know. I have my answer, but I'm curious, what do you guys think? So let's open it up for a little bit of just open discussion. And feel free to just talk or say, in the chat, say, I want to say something, however you feel called to do.
Yeah, I think it still sounds great. I mean, first of all, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is this jam session. You love that it's a long intro, it's a long time to get into it. And that was the revolution with funk, is also like these long jams, whereas before that, everything had to be 3-minute radio play kind of thing. And that was part of the liberation thing. Like you need a time to get going and build something. And yeah, I mean, it's beautiful to see the mixed group here. That's still really refreshing, and you see their outfits and everything just comes together. I didn't know Larry Graham was. I forgot he was on the band, and it's funny because Larry Graham has his own role with slap bass, and I don't know if he started it there with the band or after on his own kind of thing, but I know he's hugely responsible for that.
That song right there was the start of it, right there. You're hearing the bum, bum, bang,
Yeah.
bang, bang. That was the one of the first popular songs to have that slap bass in inside of it. So you're hearing
Okay.
it right there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I thought I could catch it there. So um, I didn't know they were some friend. I had no idea. That's awesome too. I mean, that makes sense. It's great to see still today. Absolutely, I love it. You know, I mean,
Thanks, man.
yeah.
I want to say I think it's still. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Nev.
Okay. I think it's still revolutionary to see that. Yeah. That whole band was an incredible band. Yeah, Larry Graham started that slap bass movement like right around that time right there. He was actually originally a guitar player
Okay.
in his mom, like playing gospel with his mom You play guitar, his mom would, you know, sing, or his mom played drums, something like that. It was something like that. It was a church-based thing, and then he switched over to bass one day when his mom's organ broke. So she would play bass with her feet. That's right. She would play organ, play bass with her feet. He would play guitar, gospel. One day, the foot pedals on the organ broke, and it wasn't an easy fix. And so he got a bass just to cover it for a little while. And he would play with his thumb. And then eventually that just, you know, he ended up with Sly and all that. But I think it's still revolutionary to see that, just because even today, I would say even today, I'm impressed when I see bands with men and women, when I see bands of different races, you know, playing music. We've come a long way in terms of, you know, you really can't say like, oh, only black people can break dance, or only black people can play funk, or only white people can say rock. I mean, now, you know, after all this time, we see that, you know, the melanin in your skin doesn't determine how much soul you got, how much funk you got. You know what I mean? But at that time in this country, that was crazy, and the cats were doing it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, the cats were pushing those boundaries and breaking those walls, and sort of, you know, testing even that performance right there. You realize they're on a TV show, you know, even James Brown, you know, very tight. I mean, Motown, the whole, everything that was going on right there, it was like, deliver the song, deliver the thing. And Sly went out there and said, I'm going to set the vibe. I'm not even going to get into the song for about 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, like
I'm going to get the vibe going. Everybody at home is going to be on my wavelength before I even play the song, you know. And it was just establishing that sort of, that center, that I don't know, like that energy, you know what I mean? And just it's just, you forget you're about to hear the song that you know until it hits, and when it hits, you're like, you're already at the show, you know. So I'm gonna get into that a little bit later, just about how revolutionary Sly was. But yeah, I think that's still remarkable to see. And what if this took place in you know, and there was no video? I mean, I'm psyched that it's documented when that started to happen. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable. Yeah.
I was just going to add about, to compliment what Neff was saying, and what, again, we're going to hear from him in more depth in a second. But right before COVID hit, he was curating this series of shows at this spot right outside of Boston. It's called The Porch, Southern Fare, and Juke Joint. And he was bringing together all these artists. And for me, if I think about seeing some of those performances, again, right before COVID hit, it looked a little bit like what we just saw from that clip back in the day. And it's amazing, Neff, that at this day and age, you were able to recreate some of that amazing energy, but with Boston artists, and they were just shining. I look forward to getting back to that as soon as COVID's behind us, but I just wanted to shout you out for that.
Can't wait.
Oh, sorry. Somebody else say something?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I'm glad that you chose Sly as kind of like your quintessential funk band. I totally agree, and it actually reminds me, I don't know if you've seen the Tony Gogo video of him describing Sly as kind of demonstrating funk. And he tells the story of the FBI. Sly was into drugs, and the FBI was looking for Sly in the bathroom, and the FBI busts down the door, and Sly's just kind of like pretending to be at the stall. And Tony Go, you should look up the video, but Tony Gogo is saying like, that's funk. It's like being subversive. It's about being kind of Black in a subversive in a culture that's trying to oppress you. And this is your way of expressing liberation. And I thought his story was very, like, it's bigger than just the music. It is a culture. And I don't know, I just thought that was the Sly, and I just thought it was interesting you chose Sly and the Family. And my mind went straight to that video.
Right on. If you find that clip, yeah, share it, because I'll look for it too.
It's in the chat now, if y'all want to check it out.
You fast, man.
Let's get one more person if you feel so inspired.
So yeah, I think I like the Sly and Family Stone a lot, and I really like the titles of their songs because it's very inclusive, like Everyday People or Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself. It's like uh, you can tell that like they were trying to get all of that out, and trying to start a new wave. So even now, like listening to other bands, you can't really get those same titles. Like like there is a lot of love and unity as well, but it's like I think that Sly and the Family Stone were, like you said, at the pinnacle of like the innovation at that time.
For sure, yep. Yeah, and people really saw, I think a lot of people recognize them as leaders in this way. And what comes afterwards is after Sly and Family Stone is, a whole nother story. So I think, yeah, I picked this as a segue to, maybe more videos to come, because like I said, I think Sly really opened the doors in many ways to the full picture of what funk is, and there's a lot more that I can say about what the funk is, but we're gonna leave it for another time. But it's a lot of what you guys mentioned, subversiveness, originality, being yourself, being unafraid to express yourself in your truest sense, your raw sense, not the pretense of being somebody, but like your raw you. But yeah, I want to thank you, all of you guys, for listening in. Really, like, it means a lot to be able, like I said, be able to share my love for this music and this culture. And yeah, like, keep your eyes, your ears, peeled for, well, anyways, stay on the lookout for more videos, more opportunities like this to just like come together and discuss and talk about funk. And yeah, we'll definitely be doing this again. So yeah, again, thank you guys. I'm gonna pass it over to Aaron.
Yeah, Eddie. Let's clap for Eddie. Just a little bit for us. Round of applause. Right on, right on. So that takes us into second two. As we thought about this session, what we wanted to do, Eddie is someone who's really studied this. He comes at it from a perspective as not only a dancer, but as a DJ. And what we wanted to do is then get a musician's perspective. And so when we thought about, okay, who could we bring in to provide a slightly different angle on funk, who's living it and experiencing it maybe in a different way than we are, we couldn't help but think of my man Nephrok. And if you don't know Nephrok, here in Boston, he is the owner of Great Eastern Trading Company, which is in Cambridge, Central Square. He's also the owner of Great Eastern Vintage in Medford. He's got the flyest of the flyest clothes, awesome shops. But as a musician, really, he's the vocalist and he's the head of the Nephrok All-Stars, who I've had the pleasure of seeing on many occasions. And he exudes funk just like no other I know. And so that's why I'm so excited to have him with us for this next segment. He is also a father. And I think why he's known more as a vocalist, there is something I wanted to do to introduce him in a different way. So this is a side of Nephrok. If you know him, you might not see him, but it resonates with us. So I'm going to share my screen here and play a real quick clip that I think you guys are going to enjoy. So check this out. Hey! Hey, boogaloo.
Hey, listen.
Hey, what he said. Listen, this man got something to say, and I know it's going to be good. So join me in welcoming Nephrok to the show. Nephrok! Man,
Thank you,
this guy
man.
can dance too, let me tell you.
Oh man, thank you, man. That's something coming from you, brother. Thank you so much. Wow.
So,
Man.
so excited. We already heard you weigh in a little bit earlier, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you, just to get started, and invite others to ask questions along the way. If it's in the chat or if you want to raise your hand,
Sure.
I can come to you. But I just thought if you could tell us a little about your journey in music and how funk fits into that.
Word. Okay. Well, my father is a musician. He's a doctor, but he's been playing saxophone since he was like 13. So maybe younger. And so I was always exposed to music. And just like any kid, I started getting into my dad's records at an early age. My mom, she had her favorites, and it was the type of thing because it was the 80s and everything where like, you know, what you listened to was a lot of what your mom was playing in the car. So my mom would put a tape in the car and just wear it out, and then we'd switch to a different tape. And it was always like Bob Marley joints, and Al Jarreau was a huge influence. And then of course, the pop music era that I grew up in with Michael Jackson and even Prince, even though that wasn't allowed in my house that much. And Lionel Richie and stuff like that, that had a huge influence on my musical taste. But I would dig into my dad's records, and I remember finding to tie it all back in, Sly and the Family Stone, the Stand record, and I put it on, and it just confused me. Like, I was so amazed by how different it sounded from everything else. It didn't sound like the jazz records that my dad had, Charlie Parker and Sonny Stitt and all that. And it didn't sound like, Bob Marley, Rastaman Vibration and Legend and all the joints she was playing, or Al Jarreau. It just had something completely different. I could tell it was edgy. It influenced me, I mean, I wore Thriller out just like everybody wore Thriller out. And I was always into I was of course into Beat It and Billie Jean and all that, but PYT, there was something about the bass line, the boom, 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 boom. It resonated with me, you know what I mean? And I think I knew from an early age that like funk was part of my DNA, And even, Al Jarreau kind of like branched out into the 80s and tried to assimilate into like the sound that was happening. So I was always drawn to that kind of stuff too. Then I found some James Brown records, and it wasn't like James Brown's greatest hits. It was I think the record was called Hot Pants. And I got real familiar with that. I got really into that. And it wasn't until years later, because I was into hip hop as it was coming up, appropriate to my age. I mean, I know it started way before, but like when I got exposed to it was Run DMC and Fat Boys and stuff like that. And then I found Jazz Jeff and the Fresh Prince. You know what I mean? Just safe stuff for kids to listen to. And then Digital Underground. Well, yeah, Digital Underground, that Sex Packets album. I was blown away by that. And I remember we were all into Humpty Dance and the whole record. And one day we was playing it at like a church, teen church thing, and the young youth minister said, this isn't original. We're like, no, this is Digital Underground. That's Humpty Hump. That's Shock G. And he was like, that's Parliament Funkadelic. And we're like, what's Parliament Funkadelic? So he gave me a cassette tape that was called The Bomb, and it was like Parliament Funkadelic's greatest hits. It probably came out around that year, and I lost my mind. Like it changed everything for me. You know what I mean? And I went on a deep dive, from there, from late 80s up until now, and there was something about it. And I went through different levels of that. I got really into P-Funk. I dug back into Sly, and Prince was always like a common thread because the cat was putting out an album every year for like 30 years. And I really dug in and tried to figure out what that was. And James Brown, obviously, changed my life. So there was so many different aspects to all of them, you know, like James Brown, it was like his band was like type jazz musicians, but then there was something visceral, like the beat was so important. You know, the beat was so important. The rhythm was so important. It was so locked in. It wasn't loose like jazz. It was locked in, um, to get, and your heartbeat beats steady. You know what I'm saying? So when you think about how steady your heart beats, I just felt like it was something about that kind of groove, where everyone was locked into a certain part, but it still had like this live, um rawness to it, you know, because James Brown's vocals. It's funny because James Brown, when he started, was I mean, if you really dig back into the early 60s, it was like trying to get down with the soul movement. He was trying to be a crooner. And that like Apollo, Live at Apollo 1962 type era. I mean, it there was moments where it was funky, but it was more of a soul operation than a funk operation. You know what I mean? And I think it sort of developed as he developed, the idea of everyone locking into their own little part and becoming a rhythm is something very danceable to that. Sly came around out of San Francisco, and it was a little bit broader minded in terms of what was going on in America. You know what I mean? And I really resonated with that. I mean, Sly was a revolutionary. There's tracks that you don't know that you should maybe some of you don't know that you should dig into. There's a song called Color Me True, and it's so heavy what he's talking about. You know what I mean? It's about, oh, I'll let you check it out on your own. And Are You Ready? Don't hate the black, don't hate the white. If you get bitten, just hate the bite. Make sure your heart is beating right. Lyrics like that, and the vibe of that was like not really rock and roll and not really funk and not really soul, but like all funk has elements to me of African rhythm. It has elements of gospel. It has elements of rock and roll. It has elements of jazz, you know, and I think that's what appeals to me about it. You know, and then George Clinton and them took it to the next level. I mean, they started out like a heavy metal. Well, they started out like a Motown group, a passed over Motown group, because they were actually signed to Motown. And Motown had a habit of, you know, like signing people and then shelving it for 5 years. You had to just wait. And George was sneaky with it, and he went to another label and did some stuff. And, you know, but they were trying to be like a doo-wop group. They were a doo-wop group, the Parliaments. And then when the backing band Funkadelic was trying to cut their own path in like the early 70s, they were trying to be a heavy metal band. And there's something about it. It's not like they were imitating anything, but they were like a formidable hardcore rock band. And then when Bootsy and them cats came over from the James Brown unit and brought the concept of the one and the horns and the rhythm stuff, Parliament came back and sort of defined their sound as we know it now as Parliament. And Parliament Funkadelic together is just, I mean, that is my life's blood to this day, you know, is P-Funk. I mean, I'm really all about that. And there was other bands that had like different elements of that, Ohio Players and Cameo and all that, but P-Funk was like Sly and like James Brown were just revolutionary, you know, trendsetters, you know, to the point where it influenced music that we have today to this point. I mean, hip hop, I don't know what hip hop would be if it wouldn't be, you know, it's all like hip hop is sort of an extension of funk with the samples and everything else and the rhythm and, you know, the expression. So, yeah, I just, my journey with funk music, you know, and I was just imitating what I saw, you know, I was always trying to like cop what they were doing and figure out and singing along with it. And it just slowly became like who I was and what I was destined to do with my life. And I couldn't see it any other way, you know, you still can't tell me there's any other way, you know.
I know you. There's that phrase about, you know, I walk with the funk, I talk with the funk, I sleep with the funk, I die for the funk.
Yeah.
I mean, that's from hip hop,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
but still that resonates so much. And I wanted to ask you about something you touched on as you were describing for what you see and what you hear, what you feel as the defining elements of funk music. You talked about On the One. I've heard On the One mentioned on several other occasions as that's a certain pattern that distinguishes funk in some ways, one of the many things. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
The one is like the anchor. It is the anchor. I mean, because if you really think about funk or how I dance, I'll just say me, because I can't really speak on how y'all dance. Y'all are so nasty. Let me just shout out the Beantown Lockers for 1 second and just say, man, I just love everything you guys are doing and keeping the culture alive and just really inspiring others to learn. But the one is the anchor, man. That is the thing that everybody sort of everybody unifies over that first beat. That is the anchor to set everybody on one playing field, on one note, on one beat. But the snapback, which makes it funky, is on the 2 and 4. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where we clap. That's where I pop the thing out, is on the 2 and the 4. But without the 1, there is no 2. So you got to have the 1 to let you know where the 2 is. You know what I mean? That as far as I know, that was a concept that James Brown really drilled into when he was coming out of that soul crooning stage and transforming his outfit into a funk unit. The 1 was something that he enforced. James Brown was like an organ player, in my opinion, a very bad organ player, but he he was a musician-minded singer, band leader. You know what I mean? It's like he probably couldn't play bass, maybe he could play drums. I'm not really sure, but we don't know him for that. But he definitely knew what the drummer was doing. If you weren't playing it right, he would say, no. It's like boom, set to die. He was one of them cats. So he enforced the idea of the 1, and just so happened when he pulled in Bootsy and Catfish and Frankie Cash, Waddy, over to the JBs, which is like, I would say their funkiest, James Brown's funkiest era. That's where like Sex Machine and Super Bad, and I mean, there's like a 2-year period. It was very quick. It was like a year and a half maybe, and they wrote all the hits that I think define when you think of like the funkiest James Brown stuff. It was right in that 1970-71 era. There's actually another thing, y'all make a little note. There's a live album called Love, Power, Peace, and it was James Brown live at the Olympia in Paris. I think it's still in circulation. You could probably stream it if you can ever like buy it. Love, Power, Peace is the funkiest show I have ever heard. I mean, it is like the pinnacle summit of the James Brown Mountain. And it's Bootsy and Clyde Stubblefield on the drums, and Jabo too, Catfish, and a bunch of cats. But Bootsy and Catfish, I think they got fired, or they might have left, but they went to P-Funk, and they brought that concept to George. Up until that point, I would say I don't think the main focus for George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelics Funk was really on the 1. They were more about like concepts. It was the wildest, freest minded, blackest thing that there was like Parliament Funkadelic being like, just free your mind and your ass will follow. And their first couple albums, Maggot Brain, and just this sort of like, let's break the chains of us having to conform and sort of sterilize ourselves to be accepted by society. Let's be as wild as we can be. Let's be free. And for the time period, coming out of civil rights movement and everything else, that's revolutionary. George Clinton was in Parliament Funkadelic, where, man, I mean, what they did to the culture is crazy. But when they brought Bootsy and them in, and that concept of the 1 with the horns and all that stuff, I mean, that changed music forever. I mean, it's still, a concept that people use, to get it.
Most definitely. And
Yeah.
I just want to lift up a comment that came in, and I'm not sure with reference to what part it may have been, but this came from you, Mark. If you'd like to just elaborate, but you were talking about they had a lot of Hendrix too. I don't know if you're talking about P-Funk maybe. I'd be interested in hearing more about what you were thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What's up, Neff?
What's up, man?
All right. So first, let me just say, I honestly, I wouldn't even be in this conversation right now if it wasn't for Neff, because him and I played in a band a long time ago, and we became fast friends. And him and I used to ride together to almost every rehearsal. And I'm a trumpet player, I'm a horn player, so him and I used to ride together at every rehearsal. And Neff would always have a tape or a CD, be like, "Yo, check this out, check this out, check this out." Every time we went to rehearsal, it would always be something. Oh, I mean, that Love Power piece was always playing in my car every time he was in there. Al Jarreau Glow was always playing in my, like, always some live Prince or live D'Angelo cut was always good. But when I was agreeing with him on the just like the cauldron of music that is funk. I mean, and what we were talking about before with Ed was just the message in funk was always a unity, right? Because funk in itself is unifying because it is such a big cauldron of different music. And Neff pointed out great all the different the African rhythms and rock and roll and jazz and all those things mixed in made funk for what it is, like a big cauldron of music all come together. And I feel like that was most unifying. But I also feel like I think one a huge influence for all those, some, you know, like the Motown bands and all those, James Brown, those guys, but Parliament and Sly, although Sly was around the same time as him, had a lot of Hendrix because they had those sick guitar players too in those bands. Also the Isleys, the Isleys, you know, they had that guitar thing going on too, especially as they moved into funk music. I mean, they started with Shout, so I mean, they were way before anybody. But I mean, I was just saying, like, all those bands, I was just saying, yeah, they just had a little Hendrix in them too, because they had that, Parliament had that hard, they could get hard because they had that Funkadelic band back, and also that also went in that direction. So I just love that. Love you, man. I love you, Neff.
Love you too, brother. Yes, sir.
That's
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for adding that, Mark, especially the other names. I'm over here steady taking notes on all these groups and albums I gotta listen to.
Oh yeah.
And in part because the answers we're trying to, I wanted to hear, like, what distinguishes it for you? What should we listen for? Because that informs how we move.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and he's right. Hendrix was another trendsetter, you know? I mean, not that everyone copied them, but in terms of like breaking new ground and starting a new thing. I mean, Hendrix actually, you know, he was an R&B guitar player on the Chitlin circuit and what have you. He was with Lil Richard and like the Isley Brothers, you know what I mean? And now I'm gonna send you some tracks where it's like he doesn't say his name, but like you could listen to the track and you know that's Hendrix in the background, like this live Isley thing. It's so crazy to hear. But he also, you know, cut some new ground. And you know, the thing about Hendrix that I've always said was that he was headed towards he was heading in the funk direction when he died in 1970. You know, he was headed that way. That album, Cry of Love, and the Band of Gypsy stuff when he teamed up with Buddy Mott, listen, he was going funk. He was getting away from that rock trio stuff and going towards funk. And I feel like he died, and then like Eddie Hazel and Billy Bass Nelson, the guys from P-Funk, sort of picked up that torch and sort of carried on his legacy, you know, for a while, right where it left off. You know what I mean? I really feel that way. And I feel like Sly was always just, you know, in his own land. You know what I'm saying? And as he went more towards funk, it still had a weird spin on it. You know what I mean? It still had a unique spin on it, you know? But yeah.
Yeah. So Neff, there's a couple other questions I wanted to delve into, unless others had more to add, like in the next 10 to 15 minutes that we got together. And one of them is, I know you're connected with some of the tradition bearers, some of the vanguards of punk music in Boston. And again, you've been bringing them together before COVID hit, as I was mentioning, at that Porch series that you curated and brought together.
Absolutely.
You shared a link with me to, I guess, older recording, Alston Funk Band or some other. I was wondering, you've been talking about the defining sounds like on the national level, but Boston got a little bit of a history with funk as well. And I was wondering if you could just in a nutshell characterize that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was sharing with you was a band from like mid-late 70s called the Alston Funk Band. And the guitar player, who was maybe 17 at the time, was this dude named Jeffrey Lockhart. And me and him became friends. Well, first of all, you know, I went, the first time I ever heard of Jeffrey Lockhart was at Wally's. And if we're going to start talking about the Boston funk scene, the conversation starts, loops around, and ends back at Wally's for me. You know what I mean? And it's hard to find cats that were around back in like say the 70s, 80s, and 90s in Boston that are still around to find out stuff that I was missing because I was too young. But when I got into it, I mean, I found everything I ever needed to find at Wally's, man. And it was like this really I don't know how to explain it. It was like a sacred and mystical like torch passing.
That's the best way to explain it.
Yeah. So like, you know, when I came to start coming to Wally's, you know, Jeff was kind of on the scene, but like I was very intimidated by the cat. You know, I didn't want to approach him. It was like these cats were older than me and they seemed to know something that I did not. And it was like next level funk. Like they were pushing the boundaries that you know, so I mean, you guys might be familiar with a band called Lettuce. Most of those dudes, you know, like I think they met at Berkeley, Adam Deitch and Adam Smirnoff and it's Wad and all those cats. But they were also coming in, like checking out Wally's at the same time I was checking out. And this dude, there's a drummer named Charles Haynes, and like this cat blew my mind. You know what I mean? And for some people, they came in a little later, and so they saw the scene with Nikki Glaspie, who's an accomplished, incredible drummer. And so, you know, you trace that back, and it's like, I remember the day she came to Wally's and played for the first time, and Charles was playing. And Charles, you know, let this cat named Mark Simmons sit in once. And I remember seeing Mark Simmons at Wally's, but like I was so young, I didn't know. And it turns out like Mark influenced Charles, and Charles, you know what I'm saying? I mean, Nikki came in with her own bag, but like he sort of set the stage for her to do her thing. And you know, and Jeff Lockhart was there from way back. So I became friends with him. We started playing in bands together, like, you know, later on. But the Boston funk scene, I mean, that cat was in the Alston Funk Band. You guys can look that up. There's a song called No Jive, but they're like, yo, Jeff, man, play that guitar riff you were playing before. I mean, it is like some next level stuff. And I don't know why Boston never got on the map. Like the Midwest had a ton of funk bands. The Bay Area had their own little scene. LA had a scene, you know, Atlanta had some cats that came out of there, you know, when you're talking about like funk. But, you know, I mean, I feel like the reason why Lettuce gets so much shine is because they were like the first ones to come out of Boston like that and really like make a huge mark on a national or international, you know, scope. Those cats are cool, man. I mean, I still talk to some of them here and there, but
and I dropped a link to the Alston Funk Band, the one you had shared to me. It's a playlist, you know, with some of those songs, and I really enjoyed some of those. So thanks for sharing those and mentioning Lettuce. Yeah, didn't know about them. And I was also going to ask you, Neff, in terms of your sound. I mean, I'm sure people are going to be checking out links to you online hereafter. How would you characterize it, or where you're trying to take funk musically?
Well, man, this is the thing. It's like I tell you, one of the most inspirational things that I saw, you know, in my life was the Voodoo tour. D'Angelo, when he all right, so everyone knows the Voodoo album, But that tour in 2000, when they came to Harbor Lights, Mark, I know you saw on the thread somewhere. You were probably there. I feel like everybody was there. Yeah, was anybody else there at that Voodoo tour at Harbor Lights?
Was that when Alicia Keys opened up for him?
No, man. That was later. I'm talking about in 2000, man, on the Voodoo tour. So this cat
when he
sort of tied in and drew on all these things we're talking about. Like, I saw this show and he was like, and still playing his own music. He wasn't playing any covers. This cat sort of drew all the energy of Sly and the Family Stone, James Brown, Prince, and P-Funk into one show. It was like a masterclass on the history of funk in the clothes of his music. And it was incredible. So that was very inspiring to me. And you know, as much as I tried to sort of do my own version of that, you know, I'm stuck on being a revivalist because there's so many people that don't know about the funk, and it just like, you know, it's like I want to bring it to them. You know what I mean? Live, you know, like for real, do it. You know what I mean? Like, try to figure out how they made these sounds and these songs and these different eras, and sort of and bring it, you know, bring it to the people live. And so my journey, I was in a ska, funk punk rock band in the mid 90s. And then I met this cat named Big Ben Hillman playing with a band called Michigan Black Snake. And those cats really were like, yo, there's much of a funk scene going on right now, but you know, you can come on board with us. And I learned about so much. And me and Big Ben started this band called the Royal Family. Mark was in that. And that was in like 1999, 2000, 2001. That went on till like 2004. Then I moved to LA for a little while and met my West Coast peeps out there. And then I came back to Boston, sort of got and teamed up with Aaron and Amy Bellamy and Jeff Flockhart, this dude named Jack DeBow, and later Pete McLean. And we sort of, we went on like a deep journey for the last like 10, 11, 12 years, doing like the funkiest funk we could funk out the funk. You know what I'm saying? Like, we just went in, man. And, you know, the venues are disappearing. And now with this COVID, I don't know when we restart where we're going to play. But all of us had like a regular residency at Wally's, you know, and then some other bars and clubs around Boston. And we got to open for George Clinton Parliament Funkadelic 5 times. We got to open for Bootsy Collins at House of Blues, and Fishbone a couple of times. So we've had some real great shows with big audiences. But I'll tell you, my love is for the small room, the intimate thing where people can see what we're doing up close. And you know, it's been a tough year because we ain't doing that this year. So,
yeah,
you know,
no doubt. Well, we love what you've been doing, and we look forward to being able to catch it live again. I got what you just mentioned a moment ago. That might be the quote of the night in terms of the funkiest funk we could funk.
Yeah, the funkiest funk we could funk out the funk. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I love it. So I wanted, man, it's been such a rich conversation. I mean, you talked about the big picture, but you talked about also Boston scene, the influences on you. And I wanted to just lift you up as well now for people to check you out, the good stuff you're doing. And I wanted to ask you and Eddie to bring it all together before we close. I wanted to ask each of you a question. So for those of us that are still climbing, you know, maybe we're not musicians. I count myself as not being a musician. But we want to learn more about funk. You know, what you've given us a lot of gems and suggestions, stuff to listen to that for you, you know, have been a big influence and are definitive of the genre's sound. If we wanted to learn more, what advice would you give to us? Where else to look for funk, you know, and to read up or to listen up? Any other suggestions you would offer? Maybe, Neff, we could, I'll go with maybe Eddie first. I know he's got some ideas, and then Neff, we'll come to you before we close out, if that sounds good.
All right.
All right. Well, for me, I would say start with this book right here. It's called Funk, The Music, the People, and the Rhythm of the One by Ricky Vincent. Write that down. I'm going to repeat it again. It's called Funk, The Music, the People, and the Rhythm of the One, Ricky Vincent. I read this book I don't know, 2009 or something like that. And that really like, that changed the course of my life, I would say. Um, and Ricky Vincent is a guy who, any video you watch that's like a documentary about funk online, you're probably gonna have him featured on there. He is like a funk scholar, and he has a regular show on KPFA. It's a Bay Area based station called The History of Funk. It's every Friday at 10 p.m. I think Pacific time, 10 or 9 p.m. You look that up. So I would say sources like that, and just generally just listen to music. Just, for me, I'll say this real quick. For me, like diving into funk is like it's like hopping in a time machine constantly. I'm just constantly reliving that vibe, reliving that feeling. And there's so much music. I started collecting music in, I would say, 2001. It is 2020. I still haven't hit the bottom, guys. I'm still finding new gems every week sometimes that I'm just like, what? Like, how did I miss that? Even within one artist, James Brown, I still hear a new James Brown song every year. And I'm like, what the hell? I can't believe I hadn't heard that. So dig that, just have that mentality, the mentality that sets a lot of DJs apart really from regular people, is we dig and get curious about it and keep listening. Spotify is great, obviously. Sometimes some people do it by labels. If they see, oh, this band is really cool, they have what label were they signed to, and then you just go by all the people that label produce. Sometimes you go by the producers. For instance, the Mizell brothers. I found so much music just by following the Mizell brothers. It's not even funny. So that I'll leave it at that. I could say a lot more, but yeah.
Awesome. How about for you, Nev? What would you recommend?
Ooh, man. Shoot. I mean, all right. So I will recommend taking a stab at, in this and then expanding. So taking a stab at certain little errors and certain artists, and then expanding from there once you get saturated with that. So James Brown, In the Jungle Groove. Is that what that album's called? Yeah, the one where he's sitting in the jail cell. In the Jungle Groove, that album, and then the live Love, Power, Peace. Check that out. That's the album and then the live show. For P-Funk, man, that's a tough one. Their golden era for the Parliament funkadelic sound would be Clones of Dr. Funkenstein, Mothership Connection, and Funkadelic versus the Placebo Syndrome. I mean, those albums, it sounds like a lot, but those albums were like 6 or 7 songs each. And that right there will inform you. And then start digging back into like before that funk era, you'll find that heavy free psychedelic rock. And then a little later, you'll find like a different kind of refined P-Funk sound. And then, you can always go on YouTube and watch one of those concerts with them landing the mothership and all that. That's wild. That's wild. For Sly and the Family Stone, we all know the hits. We know Everyday People. And I mean, the album Stand Alone, one of the most amazing albums ever released. But, if you check out was that album called, the first one's called Into My Own Thing, just listen to that and imagine you're hearing that for the first time and that nothing before it ever sounded like that. I mean, it's heavy. And Dance to the Music, the album, I would just start with their early stuff and sort of hear how revolutionary they were. You know what I mean? James Brown, P-Funk, and Sly. I would start there and just go on a journey and just Google and find it. If it's not in print anymore, go to a record store, try to find it on vinyl, and check it out. Actually, I shared a link with you, Aaron, of it's around the same era as that Soul Train clip that
Oh, we got a dramatic pause. Hopefully he'll come back. Stand by, folks. He was just about to give us something really good, and then he froze. Okay, back. All right, looks like we might have lost Neff there at the end. But we got the gist of most of what he was saying. So, man, you know, I was reflecting on how in this day and age, people's attention span online might be about...
the shared, but it's on.
Go ahead, Neff. You cut out for a minute. We lost him. All right. So as we close out here, I was just reflecting on, you know, in this day and age, they say people's attention span online might be about 7 seconds. That's about the amount of time you got to get somebody's attention. And I don't know what multiple of 7 we just spent together, but I hope you found it as fun, as informative, and inspirational as I did. And I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to spend it with us, have this conversation. As Eddie signaled earlier, this will probably not be the last of the conversations. We're trying to learn, and we find one of the best ways to learn beyond just listening and reading is exchange with others that feel the same passion and are trying to understand just how profound this music is, right? That moves us the way we do, that at times we can't even describe. So on behalf of Beantown Lockers, thank you so much for joining. I also want to close out by again thanking EdWord for leading the first half of the session, in which all of you a very safe and a very healthy, above all, holiday. Thank you so much. Let's make 2021 even better than this one. Thanks so much, y'all. We signing off, but now without some music.
Yes.
Here we go.
Train, the D train,